how can we recycle air? Historically, if you wanted a thing, you collected the raw materials and made it. But every planet has limited resources, and eventually you run out of materials. After all, we can dig as deep as we want for lithium and titanium, but there is only so much stuff in a fixed place. For an advanced species to survive, it needs to learn how to reuse everything, unless it finds another planet to invade and drain. Gases are also limited resources. So how do we recycle air? Carbon dioxide, or CO2, is a colorless, odorless gas made of one carbon atom and two oxygen atoms. This will be important later, although to be honest, it's always important. Plants take it in, we breathe it out, put it in our sodas, and make them fizzy. And it's all part of a very delicate balance called the carbon cycle. Carbon dioxide only makes up about 0.04% of our atmosphere, which doesn't sound like much, but it is potent, and that has been a good thing. It is a greenhouse gas, meaning that it's really good at trapping solar radiation, so heat, and keeping our planet warm. Not enough CO2, and you have a frigid wasteland. Too much, and you have hell. Regardless of what you think about climate change, too much carbon dioxide is bad. Nobody wants this. But there are solutions to capture what we release so you can keep your Dodge Ford Ram and still have clean air. To fully appreciate the role carbon dioxide plays, you need to look at other planets. Mars's atmosphere, for example, is actually 95% carbon dioxide, 3% nitrogen, another thing that we breathe, and 1.6% argon, which is actually what we use to top off wine in the bottle to prevent oxidation and better preserve it, if they open a winery on Mars. Even though the atmosphere is barely 1% the volume of Earth's and it's roughly 50 million miles farther away, temperatures can still reach a comfortable 70 degrees Fahrenheit or 21 degrees Celsius. And that's in large part because of carbon dioxide. On the opposite side of that spectrum is Venus. It also has about 96% carbon dioxide, 3.5% nitrogen, and an array of other gases. If you're seeing a theme here, there is one. All three planets have many of the same ingredients, just at different levels, which is why we look to them to see what could happen to us. Venus's atmosphere is over 90 times thicker than ours, meaning that if you were to step foot on the surface, you would be instantly crushed to death by air. It would be like having a car on your finger or swimming more than half a mile deep. Venus just has so much stuff in its atmosphere that it literally weighs on you. Its proximity to the sun makes it worse. Mercury is closer, and yet it's Venus that's the hottest planet in the solar system. This is in large part also because of carbon dioxide. Why is there so much of this gas in our solar system? For starters, because the ingredients are abundant. Oxygen and carbon are the third and fourth most common elements in the universe. Why that is because of stars and the kind of order of operations that they make elements, but that's its own video. Carbon dioxide is also easy to make. It comes from combustion, which is how we make it, or volcanic eruptions or life forms, and once it bonds, it's very stable. Stars emit the entire electromagnetic spectrum. We just need instruments and technology to see the other ends, like X-rays, because our eyes have only evolved to see this little section of visible light. But stars are emitting the whole thing. In order to be a greenhouse gas, a molecule has to absorb infrared wavelengths, which is heat. But molecules are picky about the range they interact with. Oxygen, for example, absorbs wavelengths at 200 nanometers or less. Since infrared is over 700, there is no overlap. Infrared waves just move straight through oxygen. Meaning that if our atmosphere, for the sake of this thought experiment, was strictly 100% oxygen and nothing else, Earth would be frozen. Fortunately, carbon dioxide absorbs the wavelengths between 2,000 and 15,000 nanometers, which does overlap with infrared. CO2 sucks it up, vibrates a bit, and sends the infrared back out in all directions. Some goes back into space, and some returns to Earth as heat. Voila, paradise. It all sounds pretty great, but like everything, moderation is key. The Industrial Revolution started in the mid-1700s, and this is when we really began to transition into machines and manufacturing, and many of them were powered by coal. This had a dramatic and immediate effect on the air quality. We have made improvements since then, which is why the sky doesn't look like this anymore, but we continue to add carbon dioxide to the air. Before the Industrial Revolution, Earth's carbon dioxide levels were just under 0.03%, and while today it may only be a hint over 0.04, that little tick up is potent. It's like the inland taipan snake in Australia. A single bite has enough venom to kill 100 people. Sometimes it doesn't take much to cause a lot of damage. And to be fair, that 0.04% is misleading. The jump from 0.03 to 0.04 is billions upon billions of tons of carbon dioxide. So It is objectively a lot. So how do we keep this thing we need and use it without hurting ourselves? Carbon capture is a method of taking carbon dioxide from the air or directly from an industrial source, so before it even reaches the air. In a sense, nature is already doing this. It's called the carbon cycle, and it's the process through which carbon is cycled through the air, ground, plants, animals. Your first thought was probably the plants, and yes, through photosynthesis, they pull carbon dioxide from the air and convert it into chemical compounds like sugar that feed the plant. And the byproduct of that is the oxygen, which is released for us to breathe. A mature tree can absorb over 48 pounds or 22 kilograms of CO2 in a single year. We call the Amazon the lungs of the planet because it is the largest rainforest, but the real heavyweight champion here is the ocean. It absorbs a third of all CO2 emissions and generates half of our oxygen. As CO2 levels increase in the air, so do they increase in the ocean, which can make the water warmer and more acidic. This causes challenges for the physical development of water life and their food source. Before the Industrial Revolution, the amount of CO2 that went into the air was about the same as what the ocean and plants absorbed. The cycle was balanced, but now we're digging up things that make more CO2 from within the earth and putting it into the air. The cycle can't keep up with that new surplus. While CO2 levels have changed over the eons and life finds a way, we have evolved to a very specific set of conditions, as have the life forms around us that we rely on to survive. Saying this is a natural process is like saying syphilis is natural. Yeah, but we still created antibiotics for it, didn't we? Carbon capture projects are currently happening. One method is called CCS, or carbon capture and storage, where we capture CO2 before it even reaches the air and put it back into the ground. Some parts of the world are already doing it. In total, collecting over 50 million tons each year, which is roughly the same amount as what Greece alone emits. For the most part, they use a liquid to chemically remove CO2 before it reaches the smokestack. The gas is compressed and transported, usually through a pipeline, and pushed back deep into old oil reserves. Which is convenient because the oil and gas industry already has a lot of that infrastructure set up. It also just continues the cycle where we take it from the crust and put it right back in. Another method is direct air capture. That's for CO2 that's already in the air. Fans funnel outdoor air, and then CO2 is chemically removed from the other molecules like oxygen and nitrogen. It can then be stored underground or converted into products like building materials, clothes, or vodka. Vodki. The idea of installing a bunch of fans on top of buildings and just having them filter air quietly in the background sounds pretty appealing. But it does have a few issues. For one, regular atmospheric air has a low concentration of CO2 compared to a smokestack. So it's not super efficient, and the chemical extraction consumes a lot of energy because it needs heat. And what's the point of all this if you're burning more fuel to clean the fuel that's being emitted? Direct air capture is also expensive, and you can't convince nations, especially those rising out of poverty who are trying to build new industries of their own, to do something that will cost more money. So we need to find a way to either chemically extract CO2 without using fossil fuels in the process, or find shortcuts around the extraction step, all while making it cheaper. Fortunately, there are people working on it, because there always is. The largest direct air capture facility in the world is in Iceland, and they began operations in 2024 with a capacity of 36,000 tons of CO2 removed per year. What's great about this location is they can rely on geothermal energy, so heat from beneath the surface, to power the facility. They're able to skip this step and use renewable energy, which is awesome. But what about nations that are not sitting on such a geologically active site? Another method that could prove to be useful out of the University of Helsinki in Finland uses a compound made from a superbase and alcohol that, by just sitting there, being heated to a modest 158 degrees Fahrenheit or 70 degrees Celsius, has an unusually high carbon capture capacity. 1 gram absorbs 156 milligrams of CO2. Most importantly, it doesn't bind with oxygen or nitrogen or much else in the atmosphere, so it skips the step of needing to be separated from those molecules. The material is safe and cheap to make, but it is apparently in a liquid form. Liquid doesn't have a whole lot of surface area, so there's not enough space for air to move through and have a reaction. The next step would be to bind it to something like silica so that it can be turned into a solid. That would make it easier to store, ship, and create more points of contact. Earth is a closed system, meaning we don't really gain or lose carbon, just like we don't gain or lose gold. What's here is here, unless an asteroid brings us an early Christmas gift. So we have to balance what we got. We use CO2 for all sorts of things, from freezing to fire extinguishers to medicine. But most notably, it's beverage companies, which use over 60 million metric tons of it a year for sodas and sparkling water. That's what makes a drink carbonated, carbon dioxide. Breathing too much is bad for your lungs because they weren't built to filter that much CO2. Your digestive system, on the other hand, does just fine with it. Kind of like how snake venom can be digested in small quantities and assuming you have no open wounds, as opposed to a bite that goes straight into your bloodstream. Some body parts can handle things, others can't. We emit billions of tons of CO2 into the atmosphere, which is bad in the sense that we don't want to breathe it or make the planet warmer, but good in that it's a resource we can easily access if we built the right infrastructure for it. It's not every day that the thing we need is just floating around. As of now, there are over 1,000 plants at different stages of development worldwide, with 77 in operation. And strangely enough, the United States is one of the leading nations to support it. In 2024, the Department of Energy announced more than $58 million in federal funding to projects that could develop commercially viable methods. If you like clean air and you don't like to waste, then recycling carbon dioxide is a no-brainer. We just need to figure out the most efficient way of reusing CO2 because energy, as a type 0.8 civilization on the Kardashev scale, is a catch-22. The main challenges now are making it more energy efficient and cheaper so that companies want to incorporate it. Overall, I do think this will be a successful endeavor and carbon capture will be a regular aspect of operations. It's just a matter of figuring out the best method because we don't have a choice.